Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do another recommendations video for SpringAthon. So if you don't already know, the SpringAthon is a readathon that I'm doing together with Emma from A Cup of Books on BookTube, and there's also an Instagram challenge that is going on during the same time period that I'm doing together with Juliana from the Blank Garden. So I will link the hosts links and the announcement video links below so you can find all of the information you need for the SpringAthon. But the basic premise of it is to read nature writing books. So it could be fiction or non-fiction. I've already done a nature memoir recommendations video that I will also link below, and to give you some ideas of books that you might possibly be interested in picking up for the SpringAthon, or just in general recommendations of books that I think is worth looking into. So today I wanted to do recommendations with nature writing in fiction books. So these are all, in one way or another, they have nature elements to them, and they also fit with the prompts for the SpringAthon. So I wanted to get the most obvious out of the way first. We have Remarkable Creatures by Tracy Chevalier. This is a fictionalized account of Mary Anning's life. So Mary Anning was a real fossil hunter. She did some discoveries of especially dinosaur fossils that had a major impact in the development of ideas and theories around evolution and just in general the academic field of geology and paleontology. She had a really important influence in those. So this is a fictionalized account of her life from her beginning interest in fossil hunting and especially her friendship with another woman called Elizabeth. For me, Chevalier is just really excellent at creating a historical fiction setting and really bringing you in as a reader. It is fairly accurate to Mary Anning's life as well from what I've read so far. Remarkable Creatures could fit either with the water prompt because it's set in Lyme Regis, which is a coastal town in England. It could also work, of course, for the animal prompt because it's about fossil hunting and the fossils being ancient life forms. The next one I wanted to talk about is The Animals at Lockwood Manor, which is written by Jane Healey, and this one came out fairly recently at the beginning of 2020. So this is a historical fiction book set in the Second World War where a woman works as a curator for the Natural History Museum. So she and a few of the specimens from the museum have to move into a mansion during the war to basically keep the specimens safe. So she moves into this new house and sort of sets up the museum things, and in the house she also gets to know a young woman, and there's a lesbian romance at the core of this book. So I think if you like The Paying Guest by Sarah Waters, you might like this one. It really reminded me of that book, the atmosphere and the relationship between the two female characters especially. I don't think that it is one of the best historical fiction books I've read, but I know that it's been really popular with readers who are not necessarily big historical fiction readers. So it might be that if you're more on the literary fiction side of things, you might enjoy this more. It has sort of a gothic tone to it as well. So if that's your kind of thing, then you might be interested in looking this one up. The next one I have is for the bird prompt, and that is Bird Cottage by Eva Meijer, and this is another fictionalized account of a real woman called Lynn Howard. So this is imagining her life beginning as a musician, professional musician, but then as an adult woman becoming interested in birds and moving to the countryside to study them up close. So a lot of this book is just her bird observations, and I loved that about this one. The way that Eva Meijer captures Lynn Howard's interest and curiosity for the natural world and for the birds in particular is fantastic, and the way parts of this book is sort of based specifically on Lynn Howard's own writings about the birds. I just really enjoyed that aspect of this book. The next one I wanted to mention is for the plant prompt, and that is Our Endless Number Days by Claire Fuller. So this is about a man and his daughter who live completely isolated from anyone else. Her father tells her that the world has come to an end and that they live the way they do because there's nothing out there. So they live surrounded by wildlife, and it's a really gothic setting as well. she meets a young man, and that's sort of the catalyst for this book, and the way that her world is slowly unraveling. But the setting of the forest and of them foraging to cook food and things like that, I really appreciated about this book. The next one I wanted to recommend is probably my favorite out of all of these, and that is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. This would be perfect for the travel prompt. So this one is about 4 different women, and they all have complicated lives, and they have, for one reason or another, they want to escape their dreary lives in Britain. And so one of them puts out an ad in the newspaper that she wants to rent a house in Italy for a month, and she's basically looking for other people to join her to split the rent with. They gather to this mansion in Italy and live there for a month, and this book is about that time. It is just one of the most heartwarming books I've ever read. There's something about the human connection between all of these women, the location of Italy, and there's a lot of nature blooming around them as well. The next one I wanted to mention is a picture book that I've mentioned before, but it is particularly interesting now because it has just been translated into English. It is Badger's Journey by Cecilia Heikele. This is a Swedish author and illustrator, and this book came out a few years ago in Swedish. As I said, a picture book talking about a badger who as a youth was an adventurer and went on all of these kinds of trips and travels, but as an adult he settled on an island. But then one day an animal comes to the island and forces him to go on a new journey. And so this book is both perfect for the travel prompt, of course, because he's going on a journey and traveling. Also that it would be perfect for the water prompt because he lives on an island surrounded by water, but also the traveling is done through water. I feel like this is such a fun, heartwarming and beautifully illustrated book about adventure and the joy of exploring and the curiosity for the world and learning new things, and also the kind of thing that you're never too old to experience something new and to be challenged. So I just find that this is sort of an ageless kind of picture book that I would recommend to anyone. Then I just wanted to briefly mention Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne. So the reason I wanted to mention it is just to make the point that children's classics in general tend to be really suitable for fiction nature writing, because usually kids spend a lot of time outdoors, especially historically, and so a lot of the Winnie the Pooh books especially are all taking place outside. Most of the action happens outside, and I also really love E.H. Shephard's nature illustrations, so I really wanted to mention this just to sort of give you an idea of the kind of books that you could read for the SpringAthon. And also Winnie the Pooh, the books are some of my favorite books ever, and I recently reread the first one and loved it just as much as I always do. These could work well with the plant prompt, especially because the Winnie the Pooh books specifically all take place in Ashton Forest, which is a real place. So of course forests means there's a lot of plants out there. It could also work for the water prompt because there's a pretty important place where the Pooh Sticks Bridge is over a river. So honestly, I think you could probably work all of the prompts into this one alone. They also go on an expedition in the second book, I think. The next one I wanted to mention is Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami, and this is a literary fiction book about a young woman who meets her old teacher that she hasn't seen in ages, and they start to meet and have conversations and have sort of a strangely intimate connection, and it's just about specifically her life. The reason I wanted to specifically mention this for the SpringAthon is because one of the most memorable aspects of this book, or one of the most memorable scenes for me, was the mushroom picking that they did. So it could totally work for the plant prompt because they are they go on this trip to the forest. I don't know what it is, but that scene is so has really stuck in my memory and as something that I really appreciated and loved about this book. I would generally just recommend this book. I really enjoyed the quietness of this one, and I think there's also a cherry blossom picnic in this, so it could work for the cherry blossoms as a plant as well. But also just a really quiet, beautiful and spring-like kind of atmosphere to this book in general. And then the last one I wanted to mention is actually a graphic novel, and that is How to Survive in the North by Luke Healey. This is published by No Brow Press, and I love the work that they do. So this one is 3 timelines, and one of them is about a teacher having being accused of a gay relationship with one of his students. So there's a scandal going on there, and he is researching polar expeditions in the 20s and the beginning of the 1900s, I think. So there's 2 polar expedition timelines with 2 different groups of characters. The way that this graphic novel is done is beautiful. It has all of these different timelines, and narratives have very different color schemes to them. The polar expedition narratives especially was what I was thinking about in terms of SpringAthon recommendations. I love polar expedition stories in general, and I feel like this graphic novel really successfully put across the feeling of isolation and desperation in a place like that, but also some of the awe-inspiring things that you get to see at the end of the world, at the edge of the world, I should say. So those are all of the books that I wanted to recommend for fiction nature writing. I'm sure there's tons more that I haven't thought of. Honestly, if you are picking up a classic, you are fairly, there's a good chance that there will be some nature writing, because in general it's much more common, I feel like, to have a strong nature writing element. So those are the books that I wanted to specifically recommend as choices for either the SpringAthon or in general. Let me know if you have any recommendations for me, especially if you have any historical fiction books with strong nature elements or about nature scientists. I would be really appreciative of any titles that you could recommend to me. I hope you're having a good day and that you're looking forward to the SpringAthon, and I'm excited to see all of your TBRs. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.